My name is Matteo Galatis. Welcome to Know Yourself. Before I dive into the Know Yourself teachings, I'd like to share a personal story about a time when I was 16 years old and I was involved in an armed robbery. I was at a friend's supermarket, and around the time we were about to close the business, around 5 o'clock, we were busy talking to each other, and my friend noticed that a guy came in and started closing the door. And then another guy started shouting, and he let off 2 gunshots. We looked at each other and didn't know what to make of it, and he carried on shouting, and after a moment, we both realized what was happening. There was an armed robbery going on, and we were part of it. At that moment of realization, my brain shut down and my survival instincts kicked in. Now, naturally, we have 2 ways of surviving situations of stress. Either we turn around and fight them, so adrenaline gets released in your body and you go and fight, or adrenaline gets released in the body and you flight, you run away, you hide. Now, in this situation, I hit the floor and I tried to hide from the danger. That didn't work. The one guy came around to the counter, picked me up, put a gun to my head, and took me to the boss. The boss pointed his gun to my head and said, "Where's the money?" I said, "I don't know where the money is. This isn't my place, but my friend might know." And then they went to my friend. He obviously said, "Of course, I'll give you the money." None of us were going to take any risks, and we weren't prepared for anything like this. So off we went, and they took us to the back. They emptied the store of whatever cash there was. They took anything else they wanted. They took some of our belongings, our chains and watches and jewelry. They put us into the storeroom. They locked it there was a big cage that locked the storeroom. And they left with one last gunshot into the wall. That was a warning for us not to get up, not to move. We stayed lying there for a few minutes, not moving, not budging at all. It was myself, my friend who owned the business, his employee, and one customer. And at this point, my body started to shake uncontrollably. This was the leftover adrenaline that couldn't be released. It was excess adrenaline that was released immediately, but couldn't be expressed in any way, couldn't be used, and it was being released from my body as part of a stress response. I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but I knew that I was in shock. So after some time, we gave at least 15 minutes, maybe even 20 minutes, for the guy to make sure everyone's gone, and we got up and eventually broke ourselves out of the room, and we went. The lines were cut. We couldn't make calls. We couldn't call our parents. We couldn't call the police. So we went into the car and we drove to a nearby phone, and we called our parents and called the police. And after some time, they came over, took statements, and I remember one of the police officers asking us whether we need some kind of support, psychological support, someone to speak to, a therapist, something like that. And I remember my response quite clearly. It was, "No thanks, I'm fine." I was far from fine. I'd just gone through a traumatic event. Emotionally, I numbed it. I suppressed the feelings. I suppressed the pain. I suppressed the sadness and the anger that came with it. And I just buried it deeply inside of me and said, "I'm fine. I'm okay. I don't need help. I don't need support." Then I continued to live the rest of my days in a pretty numb state. There was anger. There was emotion. And I expressed it in a bit of a unnatural, unhealthy way, because I hadn't dealt with that event when it happened. So my parents were not aware at the time of the consequences of such an event. Many parents are not aware. Many people do not know that events like this, even to a lesser degree, can affect us and influence us. And we have not learned how to process emotions, how to process thoughts, how to process traumatic events in our lives. Years later, when I started being involved in personal development and specifically certain therapeutic work, I really understood the value of therapy, counseling, and such practices, and they have a big place in our society. Unfortunately, the society that we've created makes these things a taboo. When you go to see a counselor, when you go to process emotions, when you go to see a therapist, there's something wrong with you. But the truth is that there's nothing wrong with you. These are natural responses that we have that our brain has not learned, has not been educated. We have not been taught how to deal with stressful events or traumatic events. We just go about it as if, okay, something happens. Now, given some people do go to a therapist, to someone and talk and express themselves and process the emotions. But I see a large majority of people don't. And what happens in those cases is that the trauma stays inside their body. And as I'll share later on, if it's not dealt with in your body, it gets passed on a DNA and genetic level to your children and gets passed on to their children and their children's children. So anything that's left unresolved, whether it's a trauma or a stress or an emotion or some kind of an event that has an intense experience, when there is trapped emotions inside of our body will seek to escape from the feeling, or that emotion will seek to escape. And usually, it doesn't escape in healthy ways. It escapes in unhealthy ways. It's just like a pressure cooker that's boiling and boiling and boiling and fills up with steam and can't take that energy anymore. The pressure can't take the pressure anymore. It explodes through a valve and releases pressure. This is what happens when we don't deal with our emotions through stress responses or through certain events that happen in our life. Now, the event that I just shared in my own life was an armed robbery. It was an intense experience. But we go through many stressful events in our life. And a lot of us don't process it either mentally on our thought level or even emotionally. A child that's just born goes through a stressful event. Birth is a stressful event. And very few of us actually consider taking the child to support it, to process the emotional trauma of birth. Many mothers after birth experience postnatal stress or depression or sadness. Those that support themselves with the right help are able to process it easier, but many of them, they carry this and they think there's something wrong with them. Even children at a very young age, 2 or 3 years old, go through a number of disappointments, go through falling and getting up. And these are stressful events that are caused, but not even the children at that age are taught how to connect with their emotions, how to feel, how to make it okay. We make crying wrong in society. You shouldn't cry. You should be okay. You should be happy. Well, if you don't believe that this is our true approach to life, then have a look at your social media accounts. When was the last time you opened it up and saw someone be sad or unhappy? Most of the people are trying to put up a good face. They try to act as if everything's okay. And I work with people like that act as if everything's okay, and they believe, well, we need to be positive, we need to think positively, we need to be okay. But when they're really asked to connect to their truth, the truth is that they're sad. The truth is that they're not okay. The truth is that there's something inside of them that is not okay. But we continue to live the life that everything is okay and there's nothing wrong. Now, this was my first trauma. It certainly wasn't the last. When I was 17 years old, my elder brother died in a car accident. It was devastating to our family. It was devastating to my parents. And for me, how did I deal with it? Well, I didn't. I numbed it. I wasn't connected to my emotions to feel the sadness of loss. At 25 years old, 4 days before Christmas, my mother died. There, I started being a little bit more connected with myself. But at the same time, I wasn't connected to such a degree that I could process that trauma in that event. At 33 years of age, my father died. By that time, I'd already learned to work on myself. So throughout my life, I'd experienced a fair share and endured a number of events that have shaped my life. I've had relationship challenges, letdowns, financial losses, business failures, family conflicts, lost opportunities and judgments from others, etc. The message here is that we're not taught how to work with these tough events. We don't have a culture in our society to deal with these events. Most of us just brush them off and say, well, it's part of life, let me continue. But the consequence is that we store the event in our bodies and we're not able to process it correctly so that we can live maximal lives. Because when you store an emotion in your body, you essentially start to age. You essentially start to get weighed down. Because just as I shared with the pressure cooker example, things build up, stress, events build up throughout your life. And that causes us to feel weighed down, to feel heavy, to feel burdened. And there is a way out. There is a way to learn to deal with stressful events, to deal with traumas in our life. And when we do, we can grow up feeling lighter, feeling less burdened, feeling less of a weight of our shoulders. But this requires a change in culture, a change in the paradigm, a change in the thinking. We need to bring in a culture of feeling back into society, a culture of feeling our own feelings, a culture of feeling ourselves and connecting to ourselves, a culture of feeling how others feel. At the moment, many people are cut off from their own feelings. They're desensitized and insensitive. And you wonder why the world is the way it is. We're not connected, first of all, to ourselves, and we're not connected to each other. Through these teachings, I invite you to explore your own self, to go into your body, to connect with your emotions, and in essence, connect back to yourself. And together, we can begin to change the culture, a culture of disconnection to a culture of connection, connection to ourselves, connection to who we truly are. To change the culture of being insensitive and desensitized to the world to a culture of awareness, having awareness of how things work, and changing the culture of how to deal with and process our own emotions and our own challenges and our own traumas, where we have the knowledge and the wisdom to go into ourselves, that we don't need to look on the outside anymore for healing, for support, for praise, for how to live. We can find all the answers inside of us. The events in my life supported me to have a deep understanding of existential challenges, of the challenges many people go through. And I've been fortunate enough to have great mentors and great teachers on my path that have helped me get the clarity and move through the storms and into the light. And I would like to, with this podcast, to support you to walk and take the steps through your life. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And I really look forward to share with you the next episode where I'm going to share a personal experience. And the further episodes, I'll be expanding on the principles that I aim to teach, the principles of Know Yourself. I look forward to share that with you. See you in the next one.